Good morning, everyone. Um, yes, Erlina, you can hang out until I call you on. It's a snowy Wednesday morning. I'm just checking my broadcasts here. Something seems to be up. Sorry about that. Let's see what's going on here. So, 1 second, also helping one of my guests. Sorry about the weird start here. I'm just not seeing video on my producer panel, so I want to make sure y'all are getting video. Good morning, Chris. Yeah, I'm seeing a black video, which is weird because I have video going out. You can. I can't see it at all. Great. So I'll just work blind and assume that you all are seeing everything. Everything. Great. I do see myself on YouTube. Great. Great. And yep, there I am. All right. So good morning, everyone. Sorry for the brief delay. We'll just get started a few minutes late. And I'm gonna just ask Chris and Arent to turn their cameras off. And we'll start with our first guest. And welcome to the Coffee Break Chat. I'm James Jackson, he, they pronouns. I'm a producer here in the city of Philadelphia. It's a lovely, snowy, again, somehow, Wednesday morning. And I have our first special guest on. And if you would introduce yourself and your pronouns and tell us what it is you do. Oh, 1 second, Adam. Sorry about that. Let me turn your audio on. Go ahead again. Sorry, Adam.
Oh, no worries. I work with a bunch of cabaret and musicians and sideshow performers around the city. We've recently made the switch to online, so we've been working with a much larger swatch of performers across the United States and the globe as of late. And I've been at this for 10 years. I'm also an educator. I work in the field of history. I do all sorts of nerdy history work whenever it's available to me. And that's really it. I'm mostly just keeping myself occupied at this point, trying to keep busy.
Awesome. I understand you have a show coming up?
Yes, we have a couple different things in the works. The first one is every other Friday we do a show called Nugent's Follies, which is like a I guess you can call it vaudevillian style show. It's like a vintage style variety show. And we try to bring in 4 to 5 performers a week, plus one vintage or old clip, whether it be from the 1920s or before. And it's hosted by my friend Drew Nugent, who's a 1920s musician. does it from his piano with his cat sitting on his shoulder like a parrot. And it's just generally a fun night. It's very nonchalant for the most part. And it starts at 8 o'clock Standard Time, Eastern Standard Time, every other Friday. And then we're also working on a larger project with Frank Horror, who's he's kind of like an independent horror director. He's also a psychologist by trade, so he's really interested in psychological elements of whatever he films. And we're trying to do like a Fellini Giallo style cabaret mashup to do like a new take on Alice in Wonderland. But that's something that's going to be coming out in a few months. I'm actually supposed to talk with him later this week about that. So they're the two main things that are on the docket right now, for the most part.
Cool. Tickets available?
No, actually, the Alice one isn't ready yet, so we don't have tickets up. But the Nugent's Follies is free. We work on tips. They're all performers from all over the world who are just happy to get a tip at the end of the night, however small.
So how are you handling doing basically what in non-COVID times would be called pay what you choose?
It felt weird at first, because when we started with Envoute, I very quickly realized the person who was our headliner and also kind of my consultant on this was like, you got to have a guarantee, otherwise you're not going to bring people out. And I've had some really weird conversations going into this for like our holiday show and our Halloween one before that, where I had to say, like, what do you think your video's worth? Like, what do you think your act is worth? And it's a very strange way to go about it. And it confused some performers, and others are like, well, I put a crap load of work into this. I mean, can you give me X amount of money? And you can't say no, because everyone's in a different situation technologically. Some people have crazy high def cameras and family members that can edit on a drop of a hat, and others don't, and they're filming on a phone. So it's like, well, I don't want to undervalue what you're doing, because in a way it's you performing for me, even though it's a transaction. It's kind of it's a favor in a way, and I want to make sure that I aptly repay you for the work that you put into it. The vaudeville shows, like the variety shows, are a little more nonchalant with that, because they're just like, we're not doing anything tonight. We'll juggle for you for 3 minutes or whatever it might be. So that's been a little more casual, but I don't know. Ultimately, it's still a work in progress, to say the least.
So with the vaudeville performances, you say it's tip based. Is that like after each act, can you tip the specific artist, or is it like a tips pool kind of thing? I'm just curious.
We do a tip pool, because that way everyone at least gets split up evenly. Like sometimes we tried doing the tip bucket for individual artists originally, and it ended up being like one person would get $50 and somebody would walk away with nothing. And I don't want to do that. And I speak with all the performers about it, and it seems to be working out, to say the least. People seem to be happy with it. Everyone walks away with between like $30 and $60 for like a quick performance, and you go around with the host for a little while. So it's nice for what it's worth. It's only an hour-long show.
Yeah, that seems like a lot better way to arrange it that way, because everybody's kind of hurting right now. So if everybody's pulling in, that seems like the fairest way to make sure everyone gets compensated for their time.
I mean, we used to do it with burlesque performers where we pull everything. So afterwards, like during intermission, different performers would walk around with buckets, and some would get more tips than others because their friends are there, or they're bigger names, whatever it might be. At the end of the night, everyone else was much happier when you would split it up evenly. When we used to do a show at Vesper, like some performers would get like we got like crazy money from it was an antique bill from China from the 40s, which ended up being worth a couple $100.
Wow.
But they only gave it to like one specific performer, and I was like, well, that's not fair. So we split it up evenly. I mean, there were smaller shows, 4 or 5 people, but it still worked out in the end. It felt better that way, because it's not like everything is one-sided. Someone's not walking away with like $200, and the one performer that put a hell of a lot of time into a costume or an act isn't getting anything.
Right. Yeah.
Especially because those costumes are not cheap. They are not cheap to make. They're not cheap to put together. Not cheap to upkeep.
Yeah, well, even outside of the financial cost, just the amount of time it takes to make a costume like that. It's very, very involved process.
Like we have Vivi Noir, who does everything from scratch. I mean, she'll buy pieces here and there to attach to it, but it's insane the amount of work that goes into some of these costumes, especially when you're doing like a a theme that's more of like a period piece, and someone has to get like a bustle, or they have to like buy, they have to go on like a reenactor's website and find like a Victorian girdle or whatever it might be. It's not cheap because they're not mainstream things. Like, I've done some reenacting in the past, and just to get like a crappy sack coat from the Civil War to pretend I'm in the Pennsylvania Army for a little while, that's like $150, and it's a coat that was literally made from a sack in like the 1800s. So it's there's a lot of upcharge because it's not a very popular thing, I suppose, or not very in the public eye.
So I'd also like to welcome on our second special guest, Erlina Ortiz, who is working on the 24-hour digital rally with us.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, no worries.
I don't have coffee. I have tea. I hope that's okay.
Yeah. Whatever, it doesn't have to be coffee. It's just because, I drink coffee, but...
Yeah, all forms of caffeine are welcome. No, we're not prejudiced against it.
Decaf, so...
Oh, all right.
I know.
That might change.
But you know what? I like to have my coffee like in the middle of the day, because that gives me like my middle of the day
You get
boost.
a little bump.
Gotcha, yeah.
And I'd also like to welcome back Chris and Dr. Arent Hall, and you'll have to unmute too. Yeah, sorry, I hit the button as you hit.
My bad. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
And so this is the coffee break chat. So about the 24-hour rally. When
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready.
It's next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 9th and 10th. February. It's February, in case you didn't realize that. We are already, or finally, in February. It's going to be great. We have an amazing lineup of poetry, music, circus. I was just looking at the lineup and saw there was going to be a circus performance. It's going to be 10 hours over the course of 2 days. We're going to have... Yeah, so from morning...
Well, realistically,
what is
it's
it, 9 to
24
10?
hours over the course of 2 days. Well, actually,
yeah, I guess it's going to be streaming overnight.
Who is your circus performer?
It's 13 hours a day with a lunch break. But
yes, that's what it is. It's because we have a break in the middle of the day, which actually isn't really a break. We can go to Instagram. And there's also
it's a break for me.
Yeah, it's a break. Exactly, it's a break for James to get to be able to not be at his computer for a little bit. And there's going to be a TikTok dance challenge that someone's going to be putting out, I think, in the next day or two, that folks can learn to spread info about the digital rally. We're going to have city council members coming on to talk about the budget and about how to support the arts in Philadelphia. We're going to have an actual budget discussion with an expert who's going to be breaking down just what all the money is and where it's going. So I think it's going to be really informative for folks. I think it's going to be really just fun to be able to tune in at any moment in those 2 days to Power Street Theater's Facebook or YouTube, and just catch probably some amazing art and or a really, really interesting discussion. So I'm really excited for it.
Is there any way I can help out with that? I just found out about this. This is cool.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, sharing it, and sharing it and just letting folks know that it's happening is the best way, because the whole point of the rally is to get as many people involved. We're also asking folks to, on the day of or the 2 days of, to share a testimonial of what the arts mean to you and why Philadelphia should continue to support the arts. And there's all the hashtags. What are they? I have them in front of me.
I was going to say, on the other end of this, I'll give you my email. If you can send me any information, the hashtags,
I will.
I'd love to help out with that.
I will. I'll send you the whole social media kit.
Perfect.
That's a big way to help, is really just by sharing and also just engaging in what the arts mean to you over those 2 days. So it's gonna be great to see what people at the last minute sign up and post things. So we'll see.
Is there a website that people can go to now to see a list of the lineups?
Yeah, SavePhillyArts.com.
Okay.
And I don't know, James, if you can post that somewhere or.
I just brought it up on the screen.
Nice. Yeah, you can go there and see the lineup, know when to tune in. There's also going to be like a TV guide that's going to be uploaded to that site. Yeah, so that like at any time you can see like what's going to be happening.
Only the old folks know what a TV guide is.
Yeah, that's dating me that I laughed at that.
I remember the TV guide.
Okay.
I remember being a kid and getting the TV guide and looking
paper?
at it. Yeah, the booklet
with the
that
pen and the highlighter.
Yeah, just the right size, you know. Yeah.
I remember they used to have like crossword puzzles in them. I think that was about the extent of my interest in the TV guide when I was a kid.
And then they would tell you also some of the get you intrigued on some of the storylines, give you just little tidbits, and then move on. And but it was
it was good. It was really good around like when they were doing all the pilots, like around that
season.
Yeah,
yeah, pilot season. That was a great.
Yeah, I know. My mom was a big fan of the TV guide because she likes soap operas a lot, and she would miss them because they'd be on daytime TV. This is obviously all, you know, for the younger crowd before DVR and stuff. So she'd miss all her soaps and use TV Guide to catch up on all the plot lines.
Yeah, I used it to find Rugrats and Arthur. Like, I was using it to find cartoons. So
same. You're still old. We old. The fact that you remember, we're all old. We're old.
Is this gonna turn into one of those streams? Hey guys, do you remember when phones had cords?
I still have one with a cord.
Do you remember when it used to take longer to dial 800 numbers?
I have one that's not a prop. It's a functional rotary phone with a cord.
Wow.
But also my house looks like the Addams Family house, so it's not like surprising that would be in there. Oh, like old stuff. I mean, I got the radio.
Very cool. Very cool. Is that a drinking horn, or are you summoning something?
No, that is a Ukrainian horn that was given to my grandfather's gift. They were like a theater troupe or something like that was coming through Philly in like the 50s or 60s.
Very cool, man. Very cool.
Looking at so I was saying that I use this also as a platform for testing some things. And I was just told by my associate producer, Meg, that there's this like echo on my audio feed, but you guys are fine. And that's because I'm testing new things. So I'm going to have to figure out why that's not working right and how to make it work better. Can't figure it out right now. I could probably turn down... Yeah, the external mic feeding right in. Probably going to have a sync issue with that, but we'll see. Anyway, so other topics that we had for this morning. We have... I really wanted to get into the fact that we assigned a 22-year-old to distribute vaccines in the city of Philadelphia.
Woo! Woo! Don't get me started.
Well, he's gonna be rich, man. He's gonna be rich.
He's gonna be rich when he gets out of jail.
And he was cocky about it.
Yes, I took them home and gave them to my friends. Yes, I did that.
Well, so he should have stuck with his first thing that there is no proof. He should have stuck with that, and then just stop talking. I don't understand.
He's 22.
Keep talking.
Well, you gotta think about who he is. He's like a 22-year-old white boy of privilege. Like, he probably has not dealt with the law that much in his life. So, you know, he doesn't know, like, don't talk to cops. Like, if you're in trouble, don't talk to cops. He probably has never had to deal with something like that. So maybe
I was saying that to someone the other day myself. One of the things we learn in Black homes, African American homes, people of color homes, we learn when it's time to be quiet. Your parents teach you real fast. You need to learn. Your mouth is about to write a check that can't carry.
Well, it's survival.
So you learn to be quiet. You learn the signals, the body language when it's time to be quiet. He didn't learn to be quiet.
Never ever.
Yes, you're right on that one.
Never.
He has no idea what it's like to be held accountable for something.
But we're seeing that across the country in many ways, as we, the recent election and the insurrection, and now people's lives were in danger. But now it's okay. We don't have to prosecute anyone, but let it be somebody who is not of privilege, and they're going down.
Well, look at the guy who was at the insurrection, and he was like the only black guy, and you got a white woman who literally breached the Capitol, and she's been granted a stay of her bail terms so that she can go to a vacation in Mexico.
Why?
But this kid...
That's how people disappear and you never see them again. Is that real?
I don't think that she's of the means where she'll be able to disappear. She's probably not a legitimate flight risk, but it's the principle of the thing. You don't let somebody go on vacation in Mexico after they just stormed the capital of your government.
It's a federal offense. It's not like it's not like they broke a window on somebody's car.
Oh, but that brother he's still sitting in jail. He's the only one in jail.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
He's the only one sitting in jail. Everybody else.
Exactly right.
Yeah. I don't get it. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm dumb. I don't know.
He also didn't learn the lesson. That brother didn't learn the lesson. Somebody didn't teach him that he can't do everything that white boys do. Well, somebody didn't teach him. I'm sorry. Somebody should have taught him.
I don't know if this is accurate, but I was told by social media. So it is what it is. So forgive me if I'm getting it wrong, but I was told that the young brother has some social learning issues, like he's
I heard the same thing.
Like
yeah. It's the impression that I got from his story is that he got caught up in something and probably didn't really realize what it was, even when he was headed to the Capitol. Like, I don't think he was on the parlay or parlor or whatever message boards like, we're gonna storm the Capitol on Wednesday, like all the were. I think he just showed up probably because hey, there's this big Trump thing, whatever. All his friends that he hangs out with are into Trump, so he thought he'd go. That was the impression that I got. Although that's assuming a lot still.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm typing and thinking at the same time. It's hard. But there's a phrase in the black community. Go out there with the confidence of a mediocre white man, and but we can't necessarily as colored people.
I was gonna say, as a relatively mediocre white man, be careful. Be careful. I've found myself in some bad situations being a little bit too overconfident. I can't imagine what it would be like if I didn't have the privilege behind it.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that you have the privilege behind it. It's
and my mediocrity. No.
Yeah,
I've had that phrase in my heart as well for a while, James. Like, whenever I start to feel nervous before something, or like when I have to do something that I know I can do, but like for whatever reason I'm not trusting myself to do it, I just go like, what would a mediocre white man think? And, and immediately I'm like, oh, he'd be like, I got this. So like immediately I'm just like, okay, I'm good, I can do this.
That's the lesson of 2020. Mediocrity.
I can tell you as an Italian boy, I would rather be a mediocre white man than an outspoken Italian right now in Philadelphia.
Yeah, wow. That's a thing.
All my neighbors come up to me, they're like, "You're Italian, what do you feel about these people?" I'm like, they do not represent like the vast swatch of like, I was taught when I was younger to like keep your mouth shut, listen to what people say, and then deal with it after that. But they were like, I don't know, like you got these people down like the Packer Park area. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Like this is the reason why we look stupid. Like,
yeah, when did Italian men start loving the cops so much? Like, come on.
I mean, we down in South Philly where I was, we had the Lanzetti brothers who would pay old ladies to bootleg for them, and when the cops would come
Right.
around, they'd pay their fines and give them another still, and they just keep the mouth shut, stay away from the cop. And I don't know what switched. I mean, the whole like Columbus thing is idiotic. He probably wasn't even Italian. Like
He was
nowhere near
Genoan.
Philadelphia.
No,
Because Italy
actually-
didn't exist at the time. So, but
He was from Genoa, but he was probably Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the other interesting thing about I always find this really funny anytime the Christopher Columbus thing gets brought up, and I'm just going to interject this real quick. Christopher Columbus was North Italian, if he was Italian at all, which means he would have spat on the Southern Italians that were all rallying around.
And he
his
probably
statue in
would
South
have
Philly.
considered himself closer to like a Habsburg or a German.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
anything.
right. Or Albanian. I know Albanians
Yeah.
are very prominent in that area. That's actually my Italian heritage. I'm the one with the true stake to the Christopher Columbus legacy, and I honestly I want it gone. It's
He was
gotta
a
go.
joke. Like he went to like the Spanish king and queen who was they were half Austrian anyway, and he was like, I got this great idea. The world's shaped like a pear, and if I go left far enough, I'll be on the right. And they're like, whatever. They gave him a couple cheap ships and said he'll never come back. And like, I don't know, man. And it's just like such a gung ho thing. It's like you have so many prominent Italians you could be celebrating. Shit, you could put Danny DeVito up on the statue down in Marconi Plaza, and
You
he'd
should.
be better than Marconi. Marconi never left Europe his entire life. Like, why is he here in Philadelphia? He lived between London and Rome. Like, why? Pick another Italian. Like, there's so many better people you could do.
There is a historical reason for that. It was almost kind of as a peace offering from like the sort of larger waspy group of whites in the United States. Is like, we'll put some statues of Christopher Columbus up for the Italians because we're kind of like ceremonially allowing them to also be white because they agreed to be kind of culturally prejudiced against other groups. So as
Were
that
they being-
transition happened, yeah.
Question:
It wasn't that quid pro quo, but sorry. Go ahead.
Was
Doc.
that happening during what was called the Monument Movement? That was like the late 1870s, 1890s into that area.
No, this is like the
It was more
early
recent,
19th,
yeah.
the early
You think?
20th century.
Okay.
Yeah,
but it was
more
also
recent than
happening during a time where there was a lot of anti-Italian sentiment.
that. Also accurate, yeah.
Yeah, so they were trying to counter. So there were elements of the KKK that wanted to lynch Italians, and so
they
the
did
federal
down in New
government
Orleans.
stepped in and said, "No, Italians are part of our culture."
And I don't know, it's always been very strange because I've always felt like a wee bit of an outlier because like I'm too minority to be white and too white to be a minority. So it's just like I try my best to toe the line and make sure, like especially as an educator, I try my best to be as inclusive as humanly possible because it's like it's a weird position for me to be in just as a South Philly young Italian, younger Italian.
So
As a
I
multi-ethnic
we all-
person, that happens to me all the time.
just for reference, guys, I did look up real quick when the Columbus statue in Philadelphia went in, just for accuracy's sake. I was surprised. It's actually October 12th, 1876. So
I
It's
thought
that
it was,
old?
I thought it was part of the Monument Movement.
Yeah,
And
the
There was
doctor
nothing
called it-
down there in the 1870s. It was just like pig farms.
But it was there was this large monument movement, and a lot of the monuments
Yeah.
that we see, including the Confederate ones, all went up during this time period as a way to mark aspects of American history. So this was starting right after the Civil War to try to rebuild and reunite the country. So
Right. Yeah,
Columbus is a dumb way to do it.
Yeah, right.
As
Yeah,
are
I
the
mistakenly
Confederate
thought
statues,
Columbus,
but
the
hey,
Columbus
they all
ones
went
came
up.
a little later, but yeah.
They
What
all
a
went
dumb.
up. Though.
Oh Jesus! I mean, it's also what is it?
Well, think about who you're trying to unite too with those statues. Like, you know, like for we have the perspective to go like, yeah, using Christopher Columbus to try and unite the entire United States is kind of stupid. But in 1876, the entire United States meant something very different. You know,
who was it? Was it Washington Irving who wrote like the blatantly like incorrect poem about and then the whole I can't even remember it now. The whole Columbus poem, wasn't that Washington Irving who wrote that? I believe it was him. It was either him or
Ocean Blue, like
Yeah.
that one, the school one. Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. Hold on, I'll find it for you.
It's that, or he wrote that, or like a story about him, and that's kind of what kicked it off. I was like, you're using.
But his navigator was a Moor. Anywho.
Yeah. No one wants to talk about that. The guys that like brought the astrolabe to Europe, and the compass, and most of our navigational skills, and got around the Horn of Africa. Like, we're not going to talk about that though.
Can't talk about facts.
History nerded out.
It's all right. No. Speak the truth and shame the devil, honey. That's part of the problem. Nobody wants to speak to that. Yeah, Christopher Columbus may have been, and he admits it even in his journals, that he was the captain, but he wouldn't have gotten where he got without his navigator.
Because he was a captain only entitled. He had the navigational skills of like a cat.
If you ever get a chance to read, there's a great book called "They Came Before Columbus" by Ivan Van Simta, and basically he posits the idea that you had African people coming to the Americas long before Columbus. And even I had the opportunity to study a little bit in Timbuktu and going into the library there, and you see the records, them talking about people going back and forth from to Brazil, to the Caribbean, to parts of the United States, Florida specifically, Mexico. You had African traders who just would go back home.
Isn't that where you get like all like the Olmec style statues in South America from? Basically,
that's what they believe. Yeah, as well as the pyramid style, the building, because Dogon, which is a group that live in Mali, are ancestors, or claim to be ancestors of Egyptians who came from Egypt and then settled in Mali, which went at one time from, because the Sahara Desert wasn't a desert at that point.
It wasn't as big of a desert.
Right. It was lush. It was extremely lush. It was a jungle. I mean, Mali means hippopotamus and water, and because that's what they called it, because that's what the environment was. And so they would travel back and forth. Musa and others would travel back and forth between Egypt and Mali and Senegal, which is on the coast, and at one point had been part of the Malian Empire. And they would just come to Brazil, and so they believe, as not only the statues but the pyramid techniques, a lot of different things. There were trade-offs between Mayan, Aztec cultures and people along the west coast of Africa long before.
Which would make sense. I mean, there's a diffusion of culture that way, and you never, like, the Phoenicians basically spread culture all throughout the Mediterranean, and for the longest time we didn't understand why things in the Middle East had similarities to stuff that was found in France. And it's, just doesn't crop up randomly. It comes from somewhere. And it's one of those elements of archaeology, anthropology, or even just general history that we don't talk about often. Like, the diffusion of history is something that's never on the forefront. Like, there's so much stuff in, like, Southern Europe that comes from Northern Africa. And it's,
definitely.
It's not just the Moors in Spain.
Indeed. And one of the things and I think that's one of the things, I'm a historian by nature. I'm a theater artist by trade, and a theater professor, a theater historian in that kind of sense. I'm very interested in the history of man and just the whole ritual aspect. And when you look at us as a base, we are so connected. We are so interconnected as as just a species on every level. It wasn't until it became about competition. It wasn't until it came about being better than. It wasn't when egos got in the way, it was all about sharing. You had Greek philosophers and historians who came to study in Timbuktu, who came to study in Egypt. They talk about their travels throughout Africa and all this and the whole Barbary Coast. And it was such I'm not saying that wars didn't exist and that things didn't exist, but it was really a much more even sense of understanding that we were all human and had something to share, to give to the human family.
The Phoenicians respected the hell out of the West Coast Africans to the point where they're like, we can't communicate with you, but we're going to formulate a way to trade with you. And they would come down the West Coast and they would drop off stuff on the shores, and they would have a couple of representatives stay there and everybody else would be on the ship, and they're like, this is what we have to offer. What do you think that's worth to you? And they would bring out their goods and they would exchange. I mean, they didn't speak the same language, but they established trade because they realized that you as a people have something that we want, and we as a people have something you want, and you're no less than me. We're just we're all travelers and traders at the end of the day. And it was kind of like mid-Roman period when that really started to break down the Mediterranean area. I mean, after like Carthage and all of that, and when we just saw like, well, if we can defeat you, you're just our inferior.
Right.
And that really, it's a shame. I mean, it's really honestly a shame.
Speaking of, if we can defeat you, it means you're inferior. I've been reading this book called Taíno. I'm Dominican. So this is told from the perspective of Christopher Columbus's native guide when he was traversing the Americas. And it's based off of like historical papers that were found. This is a historian, Jose Barriero, who wrote it. It's really, really good. I mean, it's horrifying, but it's really, really good. Like, it's very... It paints Columbus for who he really was, from the perspective of the people who were encountering him, and like the way that he was received with so much like, oh, like, we'll be nice to you. And then the way that he like used that to just destroy an entire people is really just highlighted in here in a way that I'm still digesting. So just wanted to throw that one into the mix.
The modern equivalent of Columbus would be kind of somewhere in the middle of Philly's Pharma Bro and the WallStreetBets guys. So 400, 500 years later, we're still talking about the confidence of a white man.
Well, it all came down to money, and that was a big thing that I found interesting, was that his guide was talking about how often he would see him just freaking out because they weren't finding the gold and they weren't finding what they needed to find. And that
because he lied. He didn't even know it was there.
No, they couldn't find anything. They couldn't find anything. And then when they finally found stuff, they were like, oh my God, like, we need to, they just lost their minds to the money. And like, there was this great metaphor or something where it's like, I looked in his eyes and I didn't even see a soul. I just saw like gold. And I was like, oh man, like that's what it all comes down to. It's like this greed of like, we need to just get what we can out of these people because the kings and queens are waiting for us to deliver.
Mm-hmm. It really kicked off a whole era of just like ravaging other cultures for the resources.
Well, it's interesting when I wonder if this is a cultural phenomenon that's been studied, because this happens in almost all cultures. At some point, folks will suddenly... sorry, I need to switch cameras. There we go. So folks will suddenly come into a position where they feel like they can't back out. We have that going on right now in Philadelphia with several key players in the executive of the city government. We had calls for the police commissioner to resign. Then we had calls for the head of the health department to resign. We have... Who else was asked to resign? Somebody else was asked to resign.
The managing director, Abernathy.
Oh, right. He did.
And he
did resign.
Yeah.
Has anyone asked the school district director to resign yet?
No, but that's
But
coming.
They shit the bed on these kids hard.
Yeah, can we formally do that right now? Is that a thing?
I would be the first to do it. It's part of the reason why I'm no longer teaching.
It's kind
Well, I'm seconding your motion then.
Yes. Start it.
All right, Robertson's rules. That's officially a motion.
I don't know any details on this, but I
honestly, I don't know details on it either, but I know enough Philadelphia school district educators to know that whoever's running that show is not doing the best job, and
Ain't run the show.
maybe somebody else should do a better job.
So the upshot is the school district is trying to rush to reopen, quote unquote.
there is a change.org thing going around.
Petition on change.org, yeah. I don't know. Sorry, Dr. Hall, you're breaking up a little bit there. But, yeah, there is a change.org petition about, let me look it up. I'm not sure whether that's asking for a resignation or not. But,
I think it's not asking for a resignation. I don't think, but they're talking about the conditions. As you were saying, they're trying to rush to get the schools open. And one of the big things is about ventilation. You know, if you go past most Philadelphia schools, you're going to see bars on the door. They look more and windows. Not a lot of windows open up. So they're trying to figure out how to bring in more ventilation into the schools in order to have more students in there. So they have bought these, the little window fans, the little round ones.
Oh my God, I saw that. I almost cried.
And on wood, and then they're putting these things in windows throughout the school as a way to bring in ventilation in order to get schools. At least that's my understanding.
Just for the visual on this, I want to explain this. It's a window fan about the size of my phone here, mounted in a 2x4 that just goes in the window. Like that's what you're referring to.
It's like a desktop fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not. That's not okay. That's not real ventilation. That's like the
Change.org petition is demanding a vote of no confidence in William Hitty Jr., the head of high school board.
It's pronounced Height, yeah.
Height, sorry. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, so
it was a vote. Okay.
Let me see if I can pull up
the worst part that I saw is that like you can't even take them out once they're in. So like in the winter, they're just gonna be freezing with cold air blowing into the classrooms.
They are in the winter.
Well, and that's the thing. It has to be in there during the winter. You can't take them out. The point is to increase airflow because the airflow in the school district of Philadelphia is bad.
And it prevents COVID. They know that it helps to keep COVID numbers down by having a continuous stream of air flowing through.
Well, what nobody's talking about is there are schools that are filled. I was up at George Washington, the Northeast, and that was a filled school. Even on days when like a lot of kids cut for whatever reason, it was a very large school. We had several thousand students in it. And my 9th grade classroom, the first couple of weeks of school, had 40 kids in it in each class. And it's not a big classroom. What do you do with schools like that? Like, you can't spread them out. If you have a minimum classroom size of 33 and you're at 40 come September when people come back to school, it goes beyond the ventilation. It's just like you're cramming them in there like cattle.
I'm hoping they may do something like they're doing in Texas and in other places throughout the South. My relatives are there, and I have relatives that teach in Texas. So they're giving families the option. So some of them come, some students come and do face-to-face. Some students have stayed online and strictly stay online. So they have most of them have about a quarter of their normal capacity because a lot of people have chosen to stay online. But, I understand the reason why for some kids, school is a safe haven. And as an educator, and I've taught on every level.
Especially here in Philly.
Yeah, on every level.
A lot of those kids would rather be in school.
Yeah, and so it's a way for them to get food and that they might not get. We have a food issue problem here in the city with people starving for no reason, and so it's a safety reason. Some of those kids need to be away from some of their parents and other spaces for a little bit, and so I understand the need, but it has to be done in a safe way. So if they give them the option, that might lessen some of the numbers in the classroom. You were going to say something, Chris?
Oh, I was just gonna sort of to Adam's point about, you know, the 40 kids in the classroom and just what we're talking about all, like just like the pandemic has done with a lot of things, it has really exposed how woefully inadequate the Philadelphia education system's infrastructure has been for so long. And now that it's being sort of stress tested by this pandemic, it's just like everything's being really brought to the forefront. Stuff that should have been an issue, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
That there are 40 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Or longer than that. Like, you know, there's still schools in the city of Philadelphia that have like hazardous materials like lead paint and asbestos somewhere inside the building that hasn't really been remediated properly. You know, a lot of these schools are not reasonably climate controlled. Like, you know, I listen to my educator friends tell me about how they'll be teaching class in a room that feels like an oven. And it's like, how do you expect these kids to learn anything when, you know, they're sweating buckets just sitting there at their desk, you know? And so this is just, the pandemic seems like it's really like laid bare a lot of gross failings in our entire community, and, you know, both at the local level and the national level, at every level, really. I'm hoping at the very least we can learn some lessons from this.
So I brought up on screen an image that somebody supplied to Twitter of the installation of one of these fans. It looks like it's being installed in an old chimney.
Do you want to call
guys
that an
probably
installation?
can't see it, but I'll send you that.
Oh, so they can blow the asbestos out of the chimney into the classroom?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly, right?
Like, come on, man.
I just put in the chat the link to the image. But yeah, so I guess that's blowing up the chimney? I have no idea.
It's a 50-50 chance, right?
Yeah, so I mean, yes, I want to get into the topic of, is in-person schooling necessarily a safe space for children?
For many,
because,
yeah.
Okay, you guys are educators. That's, you know, from an educator's perspective. From my perspective, I mean, I know I'm getting older, but as somebody who went to school, being the token black guy, I would have rather been at home.
And I understand, you know, James, and I can, for some kids, and it depends, you have to look at the perspective of what home is like and what school is like. You know, for some kids, the abuse that you felt at school is what they're getting at home. You know what I'm saying? And so it just depends upon your world and what is happening in your world, in that student's world. For some of them, school is that place where they find some solace. They find somebody who actually might believe in them,
Or even
who
it's just a
encourages them.
meal.
I'm sorry, Adam?
Just a meal sometimes.
Yeah, it's just it's warm, it's a meal, you know, it's those things. For other kids, yeah, man, there were times I would have loved to have laid in bed. But that wasn't happening. My parents wasn't letting that happen. No, you got to go, you know. So it just depends upon your home life, you know, and that kind of thing. And what's happening in that nurturing aspect of the family.
That was something that was really like just frustrating me beyond belief in the early days of the pandemic, was like the push, and even now, the push to open schools, but like with the reasoning underneath being kids aren't safe at home. And like that I just wanted to be like, wait, what are we saying right now? Are we saying right now kids aren't safe at home, so that's why we need schools? Like, can we rewind real quick and talk about why kids aren't safe at home at such large rates?
Oh,
you know, like,
that's a lot
can
of
we
reasons
address
for
that first before we start? You know, like, I'm not saying us necessarily as a conversation, but just like as a conversation, can we address why kids aren't safe at home? You know, like why school is a safe haven in this way?
Or in the very least, provide them with some momentary safe havens. There was nothing that I've seen to help students who really rely on a counselor. There were no public programs that taught the kids, like, wear a mask, come out, get out of the house for a little while, do this safely. None of that was seen. None of that was set up. They're just like, I guess we're not going to school then. Bye.
And the teachers are the ones doing it. The teachers are the ones doing it, because my partner is a teacher, and I hear him hour after hour calling students, calling parents, checking in, taking on the emotional labor of everything that his students are going through, because there's no one who's actually in charge of doing something like that.
And it's always the teacher. And 9 times out of 10, those types of initiatives come from teachers much more than administrators. Administrators, you know, really don't know half the time what's going on in a classroom. And it's really the teachers who are on the ground who are saying, this is what's needed for my students. I have this this is what's needed for me to make sure that my students are going to be safe and taken care of. And
so I know a lot of teachers. I know a lot of educators, and specifically teachers. I agree with both of you that from an educator's perspective, a teacher, especially a teacher who's directly involved with students, teachers are on the front lines of all of these things. And I've often thought about how do we democratize the education process in the United States so that teachers have more of a say, so that the people who are on the front lines, who have the most direct interaction, because you're never going to get an executive, which is what administrators are, to understand the issues of the individuals doing the actual work. It's the same in production. It's the same in anything.
And it's always...
So I actually have a proposal for a solution to that, but go ahead, Adam.
It's weird because administrators love to say, well, I was a teacher just like you at one point. Yeah, you had to do it for like a couple years before you get your PhD to be a professor and get the pay bump. That doesn't make you a teacher. You know, like I have no interest in being, or had no interest in being an administrator, because you look at what they do and they're like, we're on your side. We're here for you. If you have any things, here's a 75-page document you got to fill out and we'll get back to you. Or like, we want to give a survey to your students to see what they think is going on in the school right now. And then they give it to a climate manager or somebody who actually cares, and he makes an entire document out of it, and it never sees the light of day. And then on top of that, you have a union, which in my last year teaching, they were like, well, if you don't pay your union dues, you won't get your calendar. Like, that's the worst you got. Your union's dwindled down to like 4 reps across the whole city, and none of them want to help you. They're like, well, what do you want me to do? I don't know. You take money out of my paycheck. Like, there's no union representation. There's nobody that's representing the teachers because they don't care. They're like, we're underpaid. We're understaffed. Nobody wants to be part of the union because I guess we're not doing a good job. Well, that has to come from somewhere. And it's like you're stuck being the psychiatrist, the social worker, the teacher, the friend, the family, the meal in a classroom with all these kids. And it's like 6-7 times a day. And administrators are changing up the rules every single week. And they say, well, you have to establish regularity for your students. And that doesn't happen.
I think this is also similar to some of the things that we're talking about with defunding the police, de-emphasizing the way we take care of things and democratizing the way we take care of things, and putting those funds into things that are specifically targeted at what you just said reminds me of the conversation we have about police. Police is often the only thing that communities have to turn to. You're saying, for this meal, for this warmth, for this caring that all children need, the teacher and the education system is the only place these children have to turn to.
Yeah, and we require more empathy from the higher ups. And you see the same thing with like any, administration, whether it be police or government or whatever it is. There's work that has to be done. There's empathy that's needed, and it just falls on apathy in many situations because they're like, oh, that's too much work, where this is how it's always been. And the people who are empathetic to the cause aren't the ones that are getting like the front seat to talk about this. And I mean, it happens all over. I mean, Philly's been doing that for hundreds of years. Like, it's a shame.
So I want to speak a little bit on the union stuff that you were talking about with the teachers earlier, because I'm in the stagehands union. I'm very, very strong believers in unions. I'm a syndicalist.
So am I.
Right. So maybe you would perhaps agree with me then that I think that part of the issue, with the unions in the education field in Philadelphia is twofold. I think one, you guys are stretched too thin just based on your job, right? Like the job demands a lot of you during your normal working hours, and then also when you're not working. At any minute that you're not working while you're in the building, you probably want to just sit down, decompress, maybe eat a little food, and just not be, hassled kind of. So it's the classic case of like the job wears you down so much that organizing within the job becomes very difficult because you don't have the free time or energy to do it. And I think the other thing that I kind of see that is maybe an issue with the way that the education unions are organized is that they're so decentralized. So like, in Philadelphia, I don't know offhand how many public schools there are, but I would imagine there's probably at least 100. I don't actually have an idea of this.
Not more than that. It's a very big district.
Right. So we'll just say hundreds, right? So getting solidarity between like a school up in Olney and then a school in Southwest Philly and then a school all the way down in South Philly by the stadiums, whatever. I don't know the schools off the top of my head, but you get the idea. Trying to get solidarity among the workforce between all those disparate locations. Like I think maybe the solution is to further decentralize like the unions and have like maybe district-based unions as opposed to the entire.
They had district reps who were specific to those areas. Like we're used to these teachers, we're used to these students. But they just kept cutting down more and more on the representation. So like you went from like a different union rep for every single region of the city which was at one point very strong. Like the Philadelphia Teachers Union was incredibly strong and very well organized, to like 4 people that have to take care of the whole city.
Right. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying is like decentralize as much as possible. Go back to like, maybe you have a maximum of 3 schools per individual district representative, and maybe all of the schools can be linked in an overall, because like we kind of have that in Iezzi where like Philadelphia is a local, and then we have a bunch of venues that people work at, and we have heads at those venues and stewards at those venues. So everything's like a little bit decentralized, and we can kind of handle like a problem in a venue in-house. Yeah. But we have the support of the larger union, and then on top of that, we have the support of the international. I think that's the stronger way to sort of structure, is to decentralize as much as possible. And it sounds like they're going the opposite direction.
Yeah, we moved. I have no idea why. We just moved in the opposite direction. I think it was after they changed up our contract.
It might be a resources thing. Yeah, They might just not have the funding, because I don't know how much of that required. Like how many of those are paid positions. Like I know stewardships in. I'm sorry, I can't actually speak too much about our contract, but there are certain times when being a steward gets you either more money or it's its own position in a venue. So that's as much as I can say. So I'm wondering if that plays into the nature of it with the educators unions too.
Well, sorry to wrap up the conversation. It's 11:03. I don't want to hold
sorry.
everyone for too much longer. I just wanted to bring up on screen two final pictures. I pasted you all the link to the one, and the other one is right in the comments of that. So this is the fans that they're putting into Philadelphia schools. This is a typical installation. I don't know. I understand what the educators are saying. At the same time, I don't feel safe. I don't. This doesn't make me feel like children are safe returning to schools right now. And it doesn't make me feel like the educators are safe, or anybody really. The janitors, the staff, the cafeteria workers. Doesn't make me feel like anybody's safe in that condition. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, I don't. That's not confidence inspiring to me either.
I mean, I'm sure there's a level of there's a mental level to that where you want to see something larger, grandiose, or more technical looking, which would inspire the confidence in you. But I don't know if it's even functionally something you can be confident in.
I would be functionally confident in there being a rollout of vaccinations, and
that's a better start. Nip it in the bud before we got to put the iPhone fans in the windows.
Just so many resources for that could have gone to something. I just feel like I look at it and I just think, what a failure of imagination. Like there was no creativity at the table when this conversation was happening for solutions.
Well, so I know from working in like temporary stage construction, like you could have a bunch of union stagehands come in there, and we could set up they set up like air conditioning for tents and stuff like that on just like truss. You could that could be a one afternoon project and just seal the duct around the window. Like there are ways to do this where you could actually get ventilation and it wouldn't be nearly as much of a insulation sink. But I'm sorry, I'm getting
but that would require spending money and consulting with people who know what they're doing, and giving a shit about the children, right? Yeah, how foolish of me. So anyway, this has been a morning of investigating confidence and arrogance, and that's where we got.
On whose part? On whose part, though? Okay.
Everyone ends up being confident and arrogant at some point. The one person that was overconfident that we discussed, who actually resigned, was a white guy. So it's interesting. Not a conclusion that I thought about before this broadcast, but. Abernathy did resign, and so I don't know where we go from here.
With the whole school thing, I just I think back to the Floyd protests and seeing like the dozens and dozens of RoboCop looking, police officers walking around, and then I look at these fans in these windows, and I'm bewildered. I'm absolutely.
Yeah, why didn't we spend money on air conditioning units or air handling units for the school district of Philadelphia? I mean,
because we had to
get one
militarize the police.
Yeah, you could get one of those floor units that Chris was talking about for under $300. So $300 for each and every classroom in the city of Philadelphia. Probably another $300 to install it.
I mean, we could go and look at the numbers and talk about the statistics about if they defunded the police and gave some of that money to social welfare organizations and to schools. Man, the money that they put into police, if they put that into social service organizations, it would be a totally different landscape. But
and it would also do more to
we don't care about our citizens that way. It's they got more than we got. How their hand is always out. They're always striving,
I remember when I was going back for my master's when I was getting my degree to teach, and they showed us this video of a school in California that George Lucas built, like the friggin' Star Wars guy, right? And they have wave pools, and they have these gorgeous like computer labs, and like teachers, they cross curricular, they run cross curricular activities. And they were like, so what can we learn from this? And I looked at my professor, I go, we're in Philly. George Lucas doesn't pay for our schools. We will never have anything like this until they start giving money. And she's like, do you really think money is what you need for school? I go, it's a good start.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have paper sometimes. Like, we don't have ventilation. He's got a freaking robot.
For anything in the United States, it's like the most important resource because we live in a capitalist society. Like, you literally can't do anything without the money to do it. So yeah, like, is money the solution to the problems? No, you have to use that money in smart ways, obviously, but you can't do it without it. So yes, that is absolutely the first step.
And it always seems not paying for it. I am. So
right.
As the teacher.
Well, there's always it does always end up falling onto the backs of working class people to make or things like this run at least well enough. But to me, it pretty much every time I have a conversation where you're just like, man, like, why do we have this problem like homelessness? Like, do we just not have the money? Man, why is our education system so struggling? Do we just not have the money? And then I see RoboCop walking down the street at me, and I'm like, no, it's not that we don't have the money.
No, it's not that we don't have the money. Just to wrap up, our budget analysis segment on the 24-hour rally will talk about some of this. We'll talk about how the police budget is realistically fully a third of the city budget, and the increases and decreases in percentage of the Philadelphia police are basically a rounding error that could be used to fund other things. And I'd like to invite everybody to go ahead and see our special guest Adam's free show. And I would like to thank all of my guests for once again coming out to chat. Chris and Dr. Hall, I would like to thank you for always being on and chatting with us. It's great to have a variety of input and thought, and that's how we as artists get stuffed up.
Yeah.
Thank you. 24-hour rally. We have all of our resources at your disposal. So if there's anything you need us to promote or any information, please send that to me. I'd love to. We need to fill our page with something meaningful in between shows, and I would love it to be this. So please send that over to me as soon as we're done with this.
Awesome. I will. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again to all our guests, and I just want to wrap up and say, like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy what you've seen, we have a Patreon. Patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. We have a YouTube, youtube.com/LightThiefProductions, Facebook, Light Thief Productions, and Twitter, LightThiefProd, because, Twitter handles are only so long. And feel free to subscribe to all of those, and we'll bring you another coffee break chat next Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. And hopefully won't have so many tech issues. But we'll give it a shot and see where we get next Wednesday morning. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. And peace to Dr. Hall. And thank you everyone for tuning in this Wednesday. And please tune in next Wednesday. And if you have anything that you would like to share with us, feel free to chat or send us an email or send us a DM on any of our social medias. And so tune in next Wednesday and we'll bring you another coffee break chat. Thanks so much for watching.